Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. We're your hosts, Debbie
and Juliana.
Welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with an extraordinary guest, Meaghan Hackinen, a writer, a cyclist, and a true adventure seeker. Not only she's a passionate cyclist, but Meaghan's also a talented writer, whose work explores the intersection of adventure, endurance, and personal growth. Her books, Southway, The Pacific Coast on Two Wheels, and the follow-up, Shifting Gears Coast to Coast on the Trans Am Bike Race, chronicle her experience on the road and offer a unique glimpse into the life of a free-spirited adventurer. Today, we'll dive into her thrilling journey, her insights on ultra-distance cycling as the woman's winner of the Tour Divide, and the stories behind her travels. Meaghan, welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Meaghan.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
What time
How
is
are
it
you
over there?
Like 9 a.m. It's a nice time.
Okay. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, for cyclists, come on. That's late, right?
Mid-morning.
Really? Yeah, no, I'm going for a ride after this. And I'm like, I'm going to have to bring my light. It's going to be, pushing it later in the day than usual. But I train indoors in the evening and I ride outside more in the day. So
What's your usual ride like? What are you planning today? How many hours?
today is my last big ride before Arkansas High Country. And I haven't been training outdoors much because I've been busy for work and traveling. So I think I'm going to do a century because I like the feeling of doing a century. And I don't know how long it'll take, 6-7 hours. I don't know. It's on my road bike, which is not the bike I'll be racing, but the bike I'll be racing is in the shop. And I'm going to go a bit north of town to an area with some hopefully good colors in the trees and nice views of lakes. And it's a place I haven't ridden this year, so it'll be a treat. And there's a great donut shop.
Ooh,
Perfect.
bonus.
Yeah.
So you guys are already changing colors and it's chilly in British Columbia?
It's getting a little chillier, yeah, especially at night and in the early morning, but it's still a nice summer. I've been in the lake twice this week and the colors are just kind of coming on pretty subtly. So it'll be interesting to see where we're at in an area with more, I guess, deciduous trees.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's been too many years. I used to kind of make it a regular thing to try to go see the fall leaves. I'd usually go up to South Carolina, like Greenville, and I would plan to do the Hincapie Grand Fondo or something like that. I miss doing that. That was kind of like a regular thing, and just seeing the fall leaves. It's something else, you know?
Oh, one of the cool things about cycling is like getting to kind of tune into nature, whatever that is, whether it's like, the fields or the clouds and the mountains. And I think that it's a great way to kind of experience the seasons, right? And really, you have time to soak things up. And it's nice to drive to places where there's, beautiful countryside, but it's even better to experience it on the bike.
I couldn't agree more. Oh my goodness. That's one of the best things that I try to tell everybody about just getting on a bike is that everything just looks better on a bike. It looks clear. You think better.
You just see things differently,
than
if you're in a car or something. But I lived 10 years in the Middle East, so I just moved to Girona in Spain. So I'm very excited to experience the seasons. I mean, I always traveled around, but it's different when you are immersed. I was even thinking now, like, oh my gosh, do I have all the gear when it actually gets cold? I'm going to try to organize my work to try to get a ride in the middle of the day, which is warmer.
That's a great plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been to Girona before? Maybe?
No, I haven't. I've been to Mallorca. I was there in 2022 for a training camp in the 312. And I think 2018, I did this bike ride from North Cape, Norway to Tarifa, Spain. So I went through Spain, but I didn't go to Girona.
Wow,
I was
that must have been
inland.
amazing.
So.
How was it? Did you like it?
Yeah, the whole ride was very cool, and I really enjoyed my time in Spain. But it was in August, and it was stinking hot. And yeah, I just didn't really realize how hot it would be. And I'd look at the forecast, and I'm in Celsius, so it would be like 36, 40 degrees like every day. And so I'd have to ride early in the morning and just either stop or take a siesta somewhere, and then kind of, ride for an hour or two in the afternoon, evening, and then I would just be too hot. But When you're touring, it's okay to ride a few hours here and a few hours there, and people were really friendly to me, and yeah, I had a lovely experience. It was fun.
Do you feel like it's always kind of that kind of experience when you're traveling and kind of riding somewhere new? Have you ever had any bad experiences with tourism? I'm sure it's not all pleasant.
Yeah, mostly good experiences on the bike, some kind of scary moments in traffic. So I think when I finished in Tarifa, I was flying out of not Granada, but a town on the coast somewhere. And there's just a lot of traffic, and it wasn't part of the route I had planned out. So I was kind of routing on the fly. And it seemed like either like Google was telling me to bike on the beach or on these really busy, like unfriendly bike roads. And that whole experience was not great. And then when I got to the hostel, I was so relieved. I rolled in late at night. I was there for a few days, and then I met some people in the hostel that seemed friendly, but I ended up having like 3 creepy dude experiences in 2 days. And I had been traveling on the road by myself and with someone else for like 2 months, and like nothing, all positive experiences. And like I was, staying with like warm showers hosts and sleeping in the back of bars for siesta. Like I was really engaging with people, but just kind of, I wish I could remember the name of this town, but there was a lot of Europeans partying and just like a lot of alcohol, and I guess dudes who felt entitled. Like when I first arrived there, some guy was like, "Oh, let me give you a back massage. I bet you're tired. You've ridden across Europe." And I was like, "Yeah, that would be great. Actually, thank you for offering. I've just showered, so I'm clean." And then he was like grabbing my tits after literally 45 seconds. I was like, "You're not even trying to be subtle. Like, no thanks. I am going to talk to someone else now." And it's like, I can't even get mad because I'm so tired after these rides. I'm just like, God, okay, bye.
You're just like, leave me alone. I need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Hands.
And then I was out at the bar the next night with these really cool women. One of them had lent me shoes because there was like a no flip-flop policy, and that's all I had, and cycling cleats. And we met another guy, and he was doing this thing where he put like pennies, or maybe like, I guess you don't have pennies in Europe, but a small coin down the front of a woman's shirt to see if it falls through. I don't understand this game, but he did it to me.
I was just going to say, I've never heard of
I
this
have no idea. Like, and again, I had been on the road for a while, so I felt pretty clued out. But so he did it to me, and the coin fell through, and I wasn't wearing a bra. And he literally just reached out and grabbed my tits again. And I was like, wow, twice in 2 days. This is unusual.
Yeah, waiting for the third. You know how they say everything happens in threes.
Right. Well, the third was a little different. It was some guy who I was walking back to the hostel, and he like kind of tried to push me up on the wall in an alley to make out with me. And I just like ducked out, and I was like, nope. Like, I will walk by myself now.
That's not even funny.
No, that one was the grossest one, I think, because like, that was icky. Well, they were all icky.
We've been talking about that a little bit, how, and it's funny you mentioned that you were for 2 months traveling with someone, nothing happened. But I think the moment a woman is alone, it's such an easier prey. So sorry that happened to you. And unfortunately, it's happening to a lot of us when we are riding alone or not even on a bike. But you have done so many incredible things, and you're also an author. So exciting. I discovered bikepacking later in my life, and it's one of my favorite things to do. Sometimes I just do these ultra races just as bikepacking mindset. So tell us like how everything started and how you started riding.
Yeah, I started riding my bike when I was a university student, and I needed to like kind of just blow off some steam. I was really frustrated, and I was studying archaeology and anthropology for my undergrad. And I liked the material, but I didn't feel very connected to my campus. I was living at home, and it was about a 90-minute commute with SkyTrain and bus and all these transfers. So I would bike part of it and then take the transportation system for the rest. And just that little bit of cycling really changed how I experienced the day. And I was in a better mood. I looked forward to my little ride at the end of the day. And so it didn't really take much longer to ride my bike than to take all this other transportation. So I'd ride farther and farther. And then the next year I was graduating, and my sister and I decided to do this big bike trip down the Pacific coast. And it was our way of celebrating. And we had a lot of time, but not a lot of money. We were just trying to do everything really cheap. And we did a lot of stealth camping. We cooked almost all of our own food when we weren't raiding our hosts' closets at warm showers places and like food closets. And we had a really wonderful experience. And I wanted to share it with people because it felt really special to me. And I'd read books like On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and there were so many stories of adventure and travel, but most of them had male protagonists. And that's fine, but it's just nicer to see a version of yourself. So that was in 2009. And while we were riding, we thought about maybe starting a blog. But like this was before people had smartphones all over the place. And so we had to go to the library to use the internet. And it just didn't make sense. You can't keep a blog very well from the library. And we didn't have great photos. And like we had an actual camera and we didn't know how to get those photos from the camera onto the internet. We gave up on that idea. But the following summer, I biked across Canada. And I knew that time I really wanted to share the experience. And I was riding solo most of the time. So I knew that it would be even more epic. And riding across Canada is one of those things that people are traveling across Canada or a country is something that people want to do, right? They want to get in the van with their friends or do it as they're retired in a motorhome. So I felt like other people might resonate with my experience. And so I did keep a blog, and I did actually use libraries and visitor centers and my host computers. And I figured out how to upload photos this time. I brought my little cable or whatever. And looking back, I'm really impressed of how well I could tell a story without having a smartphone. Like it was more challenging, but I really valued those times to sit down and write about my experience. And when I finished that trip, I enrolled in some distance ed creative writing classes, and I kind of kept that up for a few years. And in between did a trip down the Sierra Cascades with my partner at the time into we started in BC and went kind of zigzagging down the mountain range into Baja, and then to La Paz, and then took the ferry to Mazatlan, and then went inland, and we ended up in Puerto Vallarta because that's an easy place to fly out of. So I kept a blog for that trip as well. And after that, one of my profs was like, Meaghan, you should do a master's degree in creative writing. And I was like, there is such a thing? I don't want to go back to school. I'm done with school. I didn't have great memories of doing my undergrad. And she assured me it was very different to do a master's because you're focusing only on what you want to do. And she said that I would probably end up living someplace else, so I wouldn't go through that terrible commuting experience every day. So I was accepted at the University of Saskatchewan in their creative writing program, and that's in the Canadian prairies. And I moved there and lived about a mile or less from campus. And I walked or rode my bike every day. And I lived with other young people who were writers. And I just had this really immersive like education experience that I did not have when I did my undergrad. And I loved it. I had so much more fun. I really got to hone my craft of writing. I realized the stuff I wrote on my previous blogs was all pretty awful and not well written.
It's a learning experience.
It was a stepping stone. And I think if you want to be a writer, the first step is just to write and really find your voice and get used to putting down words. And so I kind of undertook that step when I was traveling. And then I got to spend a couple of years, kind of honing my craft and reading about writing and studying it and critiquing my colleagues' work and, revising my own and working with a mentor. And at the end of that degree, I had a book-length project, and it was the manuscript that became South Away, The Pacific Coast on Two Wheels, which was my first book that published. And that was about that first bike trip I did with my sister. So I was really excited to tell that story. I think anytime we do something the first time, it's very memorable. And that was my first big bike trip. Stuff really cemented into my brain in a way that it hasn't from other trips. And I just remembered so many of the details. And there was a good narrative arc, for kind of me understanding myself and some of the women in my life better over the course of these 3 months. And then there's also the journey, which was exciting in itself. So that was kind of how I became a writer and fell into it. And I definitely don't make all of my money from writing, but I get my annual royalty check. I get some money from the library. I get paid to present at events and stuff. And it's really an exciting thing to do. And I'm doing a writing residency in November for the first 2 weeks. So that's really my off season on the bike. And I'm just excited to really dive into a project for 14 days and not do any other work, not have to worry about the bike except to go get groceries. And it's going to be a real treat.
Sounds like it. I love that. Are you going to do that locally, or is that going to be somewhere that you're traveling to?
A little bit of travel. It's on a place called Salt Spring Island, which is one of the Gulf Islands off of Vancouver Island. So it's a bit outside my my region, but it's not too far.
So it's more immersive. Definitely.
Yeah. I think it's nice to be kind of away from all of my friends and family so that I'm not tempted to go and socialize when I should be locked up writing.
I agree. It kind of helps you get into that zone where you need to be for your writing.
Yeah. And it's known as a really beautiful island. There's just a lot of opportunities to connect with nature. They've got some cool coastlines, some forests, some hills. They have these lovely arbutus trees that have this peeling bark on them that's kind of orange, amber, red. And it'll be a really beautiful place. But it's also fall. It's going to rain a lot. So that's kind of nice, and that I won't be too tempted to be running around outside all the time.
You're probably going to be outside thinking, my bike.
I probably will.
Do you ever think that? It's funny, when we want to go on vacation, we tell ourselves that's it. We're not going to do it. We'll think in our head. We'll get through maybe like half of the day, and then something will go through our head. It's hard to really completely detach unless you're just exhausted, that your body just needs that rest, and you have to disconnect.
I think you're right about that. Yeah. I've been off the bike for periods, but they're usually after a long event where I'm so exhausted and I just don't feel like I need to ride my bike for a few days. But otherwise I start craving it. And then I get worried about my training and I don't want to lose my power. But if I'm really just exhausted and mentally and physically, and my body needs to recover, that's the time I can naturally take a break.
Do you finish these ultras that once you finish, it's almost just like this release mentally, physically? What's your experience with that? Because everybody's is a little bit different, or what they do afterwards to kind of ward off any of those kind of lows that might happen.
I think my experience has been different after every one, and I'm trying to understand what to expect for myself, but it does change a little bit. After the Tour Divide, that was probably the longest and hardest I've pushed on an event, and I've done longer races in terms of mileage and distance, but I think I went harder. So my body was protesting more when I got to the finish. The first thing that happened was my feet swelled up with edema, and they were just absolutely huge. They looked like balloon feet, and I couldn't wear shoes. So I wore flip-flops for like 5 days, and then they came back down to a normal size, which was a huge relief. And the next thing that kind of happened was, I guess some of my injuries started just immediately getting better incrementally. So I had like a golf ball sized cyst on my ass, and that just kind of disappeared, but it took its sweet time. It took like weeks. And I had a bit of a knee tweak from changing my pedal stroke to accommodate this lump on my butt. And that went away a little bit quicker. It was just a few days after the bike. My knees felt fine. And the main thing was just this really deep fatigue and an inability to focus on anything for very long. I remember like I had to do a few simple tasks. I had to prepare a couple of talking points for an interview with a major radio broadcaster, and I procrastinated all day on that. I couldn't reflect on my experience in a like logical way. I could talk about stuff, but to actually put these thoughts in bullet points was just asking too much of myself. And everything that required thought and energy took longer. Other times I've traveled for races, I haven't always booked my passage home when I started. And I was so glad I did with the Tour Divide, because the thought of having to book a plane ticket was out of my realm. But there are still logistics you have to take care of. When I finished, I stayed at a place called the Bike Ranch, and then I had to get from there in New Mexico near the border at Hachita to El Paso, where I had booked my flight. And it's like a 3-hour drive or something. So luckily a couple other finishers were traveling as well, and we could all find a ride together. We got someone to drive us on our bikes, but and then like making accommodations there before the flight. And we picked a hotel that was close to the airport, or Airbnb that was close to the airport. So, we all figured we'd just walk our bikes over, and like a mile is a long way to carry a bike box. when you're tired.
Oh, yeah.
So I ended up getting picked up by airport security, who carried me as soon as I, got on the airport property, which was very kind of them. I think they could see I was struggling. And here I am.
You needed it then.
I did. I needed a little extra hand. So yeah, so a couple of body things, and then this deep fatigue. And in the long term, I think I had lost muscle in my glutes and legs because of being like calorie deficient for so long, because it's just hard to keep eating. And then when I got home, I couldn't stop eating because I was so hungry from, working and just so much in a calorie deficit. But I just I feel like lost control, and I just was eating all of the time, like double portions. And after about a month, it took me about a month for me to start to be able to listen to my body and realize, like, I'm actually hungry, or I'm just eating because I'm afraid of not eating. And
Right.
And then when I was riding a bit more seriously, I think it took a while to build up my glute strength. And I wish I had done more strength training to try and work on that. But I kind of lumped my strength training into the winter months. And I just didn't really think about that. Yeah. So I think I struggled with kind of my power numbers, getting them back up after my, injuries had disappeared. And I guess going forward, I know maybe I need to, start hitting the gym, or I use dynamic cyclist strength and mobility workouts as well. So kind of doing more of those after an event to help get my body back to where it was when I started, and not just assuming that time will cure everything.
Right. And it's more low impact on the body to do a lot of those exercises. They're not too heavy on the strength. They're strength training, but they're not too heavy on the weights. It's really good for the hips, for the mobility overall.
Well, I wanted to say congratulations on Tour Divide. You did amazing.
Thank you.
It's a heck of a race. But given all this experience and time for you to heal, is this something you would like to pursue again in the future? Not Tour Divide itself, but like this very long distance that you have to put so much into it that you are losing muscle, getting cysts, and having such a longer time to recover. How do you feel like going forward? Would you tackle this?
Yeah, Juliana, listening to you read it back to me, I'm like, no, I wouldn't do that again. It's terrible.
I saw you looking at like,
I think that I will do events like that again, but I know that there is a cost to my body. So I need to really be emotionally invested in it, and have a good training plan and goals that I want to achieve, and just have it really well thought out. And it was for the Tour Divide, but I'm not going to sign up on a long ultra just on a whim, or just because I need something on my race calendar. It has to, hold the promise of giving something back to me, whether that's like, personal growth, or wonderful challenge of competing, or some incredible landscapes. And I need to go into it very well prepared so that I can, do the best possible in the challenging circumstances. When I did the Transcontinental in 2022, it took up so much of my time in preparation and racing. And of course the Tour Divide did as well, but because the Transcontinental is a self-navigating route, there's checkpoints, and you have to create your route between the checkpoints. And that component took a very long time. And there was a lot of second guessing myself. And then just the research of what it's like to travel through all these different countries. So when I did that in 2022, I was pretty exhausted after, and I didn't want to do that the next year. So in 2023, I picked shorter ultras between maybe 400 and 800 kilometers. And they all required less planning, less logistics to get to. Most of them were closer to where I lived. I only flew once. And many of them had infrequent resupply. So I just had to mark like 2 spots on the map, being like, these are your only choices for food.
Easier.
This is it. And in those shorter ultras, I don't usually bring a full sleep kit or think about that too much. I just nap as needed. So the amount of planning is a lot less, and the recovery is much quicker. After a week, I'm 90% back to normal. And, I usually kind of need Monday to sleep it off. And then Tuesday I am, a functioning human again at work and stuff. So it was nice last year doing those shorter events and being able to be really competitive. I think the shorter distant ultras are exciting to watch because people are pushing a little harder. There's more lead changes sometimes. And, dot watchers can commit to watching dots for 48 hours, where it might be harder to watch some of those really long events as a dot watcher. So I really got a lot out of those shorter events, but at the same time, the epicness of doing something like Tour Divide is it makes you want to go back and do it again, because it's just there's so much to see there in terms of landscape and changes, and it's a big chunk of the mountains, right?
Do you feel like you got time to appreciate that? I mean, you do have a lot of time on the saddle. I know some of it sounded painful.
Try to appreciate it. And even though you're racing and moving a lot quicker than a touring cyclist, you are still moving very slow. Like, I don't know what my average was, but it wasn't more than 11 miles an hour. So compared to a vehicle.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, it was not very quick. So you still get to kind of absorb things. And when you're hill climbing, it's even slower. So the tops of mountains, you really get to slow down and breathe in before you rush down the other side. One of the things that came to my mind whenever I got a little bit frustrated or in a not great mental headspace was advice that Justinas, who I know you interviewed, gave me when we passed ways in Banff, and he has just such a great outlook and mindset. And I asked him, I'm a Tour Divide rookie, what should I know? What tips do you have for me? And he kind of laughed and said, just look up. When things are getting hard, look up, look at the mountains, look at the ridgeline, just look at the beauty everywhere, and you'll just feel so beautiful, and you'll start having, more fun and realize how lucky you are to be here. So that's my advice, look up. And I tried to actively do that when I was in not great places mentally. And it was always gorgeous. It was always something to really take away. And I'm so glad that I got to meet him even for a few minutes and hear that wonderful advice that I've taken to heart.
Yeah.
He's so positive.
A lot of light there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So going back to you bikepacking with your sister, is this something you still want to continue to do? Just racing, but also bikepacking?
That's a great question. Yeah. And we didn't even call it bikepacking then. I don't know if I heard the term until 2017. Yeah. We called ourselves bike tourists or bike travelers. I do still make time for touring because I like to kind of connect with the place a bit more and, meet people and spend longer than 4 hours at camp. And where I live in British Columbia, there's so many great bikepacking opportunities and places that are great to race through or great to kind of slow down. There's a lot of rec sites that have free camping and little lakes that you can check out and plenty of wildlife. So I did a few kind of bike packing trips that weren't races this year. A couple of them were in preparation for the Divide. I was staying with friends in San Diego. So I did the Stagecoach 400 loop as a tour. And I think I took 6 days and did maybe 60 miles a day. And the purpose of that trip was to get comfortable riding solo, because I had done most of my trips with partners or family members and my sister. And I just knew that on the Divide, I would be alone for a very long time. And that kind of scared me because it's not like you're traveling in the transcontinental where you're seeing people and communities all of the time. You're very much out in the wilderness by yourself until you drop down into the valleys and there'll be a small town. So I got comfortable being alone. It was the first time I used my InReach GPS device. So just testing that and making sure I could message on that, and it worked. And I listened to some audiobooks, and I think I picked up a book from a little free library and read, and I met folks along the way, and then had to figure out where I was sleeping each night and, making sure I timed my resupply all right. So that was a really cool experience. Another trip I did was actually with my sister, and it was the first time we biked together since that Pacific Coast trip in 2009. So it's 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we did, I think it was a 300-kilometer loop of southern Vancouver Island. She's like a commuting cyclist. She doesn't do big trips. She doesn't really train a lot. So we went at her pace, and it was fun. It was fine. We rode a few hours every day, camped at really great spots, went swimming, and she's got a really positive attitude also. She doesn't get upset if the weather isn't good or if the stove runs out of fluid. She just kind of very stoically accepts things. It's always fun traveling with someone who looks like you, because people get a kick out of you, right? They're like, you guys twins and you sisters, who's older? You look so much alike.
Nice.
Are you alike? So I do make time for touring and just bikepacking without such a strict timeline. And I think that helps me when I race, because I know that I have spent time relaxed and slowed down and absorbing things a bit more. I think that means when I race, I can really just go for it. And I know that some people face that conflict. They'll be on some gorgeous race route and, halfway through decide like, actually, I don't want to race. I want to ride this slow. And I only have so much vacation time a year. Why am I like busting my ass through it? And that's a really tricky thing to face midway through. And all of a sudden, kind of shift gears. And I think one thing that keeps me on track is just knowing that I have more flexible work hours and I can spend that time touring if I want to. So I always tell myself, you can go and tour this route. You can come back here if you want. And, easier said than done, but it's nice knowing that I have those options.
It does help. Are you a full-time writer now?
No, I work for the Federation of BC Writers, though, a provincial creative writing nonprofit. And so I have a lot of communication with writers in the community. I'm like the Zoom host for a lot of our events where we feature presenters. So I'm kind of the welcoming person and moderating the chat. And I get to sit in on these great sessions about different aspects of the craft and business of writing. And I host a couple of different writing groups. And I do spend a lot of time writing and training and doing events related to writing. I think it would be a dream to be kind of a half-time cyclist, half-time writer.
You're doing exactly what you're meant to do, though, because it's quite different than what you're expending on the bike. Mm-hmm. So there's always some reflection there that lends its way into your writing, for sure.
You're right about that.
Definitely. And you're very introspective. I can tell just from listening, and I have listened to some other podcasts, and I started reading your second book.
Oh, thank you.
And so when I was just listening, I was like, oh, I feel like I know her a little bit. I love it. And I just loved the way you describe it. It put me right there. I felt everything. And I really just enjoyed so much of it, just from your descriptions to your honesty, everything. How it starts out about is that your current boyfriend right now?
No, I'm on to another guy.
Okay. All right, next.
Yeah, right. No, my life is funny in that things reappear. I think a lot of us have these experiences where things cycle back and reappear. And, I'll work at a job for a while and then maybe move on to something else, but then move back to the first job. And I try not to burn bridges because you never know when these things might pop up again. So if I leave a job, I'm very polite about it because I never know if I might need to asked to come back. Yeah, I cycled through a couple of terms of employment at a bakery cafe in Vancouver and a couple of other places where I'd leave to go on adventures and then come back maybe a year or two later after another job didn't work out. And I guess I'm telling you this story in a roundabout way that shifting gears coast to coast on the Trans Am bike takes place on my first ultra in 2017. And I'm in a relationship with a guy in Saskatoon, Tyler, and we're kind of mismatched. Right. He's a great person, but we are definitely mismatched. And that's something I write about. And I didn't really see it I saw it a little bit at the time, but in reflection, all of these things become very, very clear that you can't see because you're just kind of in love or lust or whatever.
I'm seeing some of it in some of the transitions.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
But as you're becoming more comfortable with your independence, I can see you coming into your own a little differently and seeing things more clearly.
Yeah, and I think
that's
book. From being on the bike and having that time to reflect. In the book, I kind of start to feel emotionally connected to another cyclist I'm riding with, Matthias from Germany. And we have we ended up kind of in a romance for a little bit. And things didn't work out. I'm sorry to spoil the ending for you, but
That's okay. Hey, it's all about the journey. It doesn't always have to work out. There's a story in everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of talk about that near the end. And the guy I'm dating now, I met on the eve of the Trans Am bike race in 2017 when I was with that first guy, Tyler. And my current partner, James, lives in Portland. And we met in Portland when he came out to meet the racers. And we were in very different circumstances. He was married. I was dating a guy in Saskatoon. And then I guess over the next couple of years, our relationship status has changed a couple of times, and we had a chance to connect as crew members for a Race Across America team. So he was the RV driver, and I was one of the follow vehicle drivers for a group of 4 women from the UK who were trying to be the fastest all-female team. And we kind of like got into each other when we were, in this RV crew situation where it's very uncomfortable. You're not very clean. You're surrounded by other people and you're supporting these racers who are pushing as hard as they can. So they're exhausted and grumpy all the time. And I never made the right sandwiches for them. And we just really connected over this experience and, somehow managed the pandemic long distance. And, we're still
pretty
together.
Huge. Yeah, that's a testament.
I think so, yeah.
And being together sometimes in those kind of close quarters and seeing how other people react and seeing how you react to that, I think it's a big eye opener. When you travel with somebody, it kind of opens your eyes. You see a lot of things.
Yeah.
You learn a lot about the person.
Yeah.
It's not the same as just going out for dinner or hanging out here and there.
The first time I did a pair cycling, our friend and I, we said to each other, we're never going to speak again, or we're going to be best friends. Because it really make it or break it, because you are together for such a long time. You need to respect each other's moods and strengths and weaknesses, and problems do come up. Or like you said, with your sister, you run out of gas, or the weather is bad. And if you can handle that well, it just makes an easier journey. We're still friends. We're still pairing, but it's exciting to hear other experiences, because a lot of cyclists go solo. So it's great to hear your experience, Meg, with others.
For sure. And I thought about wanting to do a pair because I've had some hard experiences at night and, in challenging circumstances. And I've thought, wow, it would be nice to have someone else right now to ride with. That would be a huge boost, And James and I did some riding together this summer and we get along well touring, but I think our race paces are not evenly matched. So we're not going to ever be a pair racing because like you said, it's either going to make it or break it. We're going to be married by the end of it or we're going to break up. And it's too much on the line, man. It's too much on the line. So I think if I did race as a pair, I would really find somebody else who is really compatible with me and complementary to me as well. And we'll see if that happens or not. I don't think I need to race as a pair, but I'm curious about it. It's a very different type of racing, right?
Yeah, I've thought about that, what it would be like.
Pros and cons, like you said, Juliette and I were very complementary to each other. We get along really well, but obviously there are cons in the sense of you have twice as chances of getting a flat tire because you are 2 and you have twice as chance of having any mechanicals. Luckily, we always wanted to go to the bathroom, eat at the same time, but what if not? Then you have to stop to wait for the other person, and little details that can, get in your nerves if it's not in sync.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And it was Juliana and Juliette. Those were your names?
I know, right? How funny, right, Jay?
Yeah,
that's really funny.
J&J, baby. So are you planning on a next book?
Yeah, I have 2 ideas. One is a collection of personal essays about experiences on the bike and all of the loves I have discovered through cycling. So
I love these.
Oh, thanks.
Love it.
So
do it.
Love it.
Yeah. So kind of it would be focused in different sections thematically and several essays in each section. And essays, I don't mean like boring, like high school essays. I just mean like standalone pieces.
Yeah,
but
short stories.
Yeah. So one would be kind of blood love and relationships that I've built kind of with my family around the bike. And one would be romantic love. Another would be like kind of about friendship and community. Yeah. And then one, I don't know if self-love is the right word, but the relationship that I have, my own relationship with the bike and how I have changed just as an individual. And I've spent so much time alone. I think that's probably the biggest section of it.
It's amazing. We all need to do that more. It's like journaling. That was one of the questions. So it kind of rounds about. I was wondering if I know that's just another thing you got to pack on the bike, but do you do any type of journaling when you stop, or anything on the phone that you'll kind of transcribe, journal that way?
When I'm touring, I do a bit. I use the note function on my phone. A lot of times it's just phrases or a word that will pop into my head, or something brief. And sometimes I bring like a small paper journal. When I'm racing, I don't really do any of that. I think that I look a lot to my photos and social media updates. And I had a friend helping me with my social media for the Divide. So I sent her voice messages. So that collection of voice messages is really useful. And then the photos, and being able to reference like the Ride with GPS maps and my Strava files. So kind of having a good record of where I was at what time, I think helps reconstruct the memories. One thing,
It does.
aside from journaling, one thing that's really helped me is having conversations with people who've shared the experience with me or of that event. So talking to someone who raced the event, maybe our paths crossed for 5 minutes, but hearing about what was the same and different, just hearing about their experience, it kind of keeps events alive in my own mind, and maybe forces me to consider like what's unique about my experience, things that I found challenging that other people didn't, which might be interesting to write about, because you always want to write about what's unique to you, as well as sharing some of the universal. Like if I wrote about the Tour Divide, I would talk a bit about the history of the route and, some of the landscape descriptions, but the things that happened only to me, I definitely want to share, because there's been a lot of literature about the Tour Divide. So I wanted to kind of have my own take and build and add to it. So that's something I find really helpful, is talking to people, and especially people who I've ridden with, and then they can help me become more confident in my own memories. And, sometimes by sharing something and having them say, oh yeah, I remember that night. Yeah, that's exactly how it happened for me too. I'm like, oh, okay, good. I'm not just off the wall here. I'm not out to lunch. So that can be helpful. And in my regular life, I've started a gratitude journal. So I write 5 things I'm grateful for every morning, and then follow that up with a little bit of free writing. So just kind of writing on whatever project I'm working on. Sometimes I'll dive into that, and otherwise just kind of whatever my mood is like, or if I wake up, grumpy about something, I'll kind of write on that.
A little resistant of it.
Yeah. and sometimes if I try and flip the script, if I acknowledge that like, I'm not happy about something, and then I try and think about, okay, what can I be positive about? Like if something happened at work that I wasn't so keen about, I will write in my gratitude journal, I am grateful for flexible hours at my job.
Just something positive, right?
And in so many cases, there's something positive. I'm not going to say everything, because that's a huge sweeping generalization, but in so many of our experiences that, kind of get under our skin, there's something positive that we can pull and lean into a little bit to keep our mindset in the study side of things, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good hack. Like you said, I really liked what Justina's told you about just literally looking up. That can work no matter what. Just walking outside and looking up. And it also just redirects your mind instantly, so that we can look at something else and not look within. Because that's so much of it, is sometimes we just need to look outside of ourselves. You also write about yourself. I think it's just so important.
Yeah, I think everyone has a story to tell, and everyone's story is worth sharing. And sometimes we need to elevate certain kinds of stories or others based on, cultural and historical circumstances. But I think there's no reason why you shouldn't write down your own story and share it at least with the people you love in your community. And I think whether or not you want to be a professional writer, writing has so many benefits. It helps you work through stuff in a way that you don't when you're just thinking. I think my mind is sometimes like on a hamster wheel, and it just goes around. Yeah. And it is this cyclical, not, I'm not going to say not productive, but it doesn't go anywhere. And these thoughts will keep repeating. And sometimes it'll be like, a memory of the Divide, and they'll just keep going around. And I'm like, okay, there's something here. You need to sit down and write on it, because you're not getting past this image of riding into a sunset in the Great Basin. You need to write on that and see what else is there and explore it. And I think that maybe for deep thinkers, you can do that in your mind. But for me, being able to put stuff on paper and being able to write through it for my eyes only, and then kind of read through it and see what's there and see if there's any recurring themes or what the story is actually about. Maybe it's about something totally different than I thought. And just being able to discover that as a means of personal growth is really valuable. And I think there's a reason why our teachers made us do journaling and reflection every day in elementary school. There's a lot there. And sometimes we can't get it out in conversation, either because we just don't have the words, or we need to think a little bit more about what we're saying, or maybe we just don't have the people in our lives we feel comfortable telling these stories to. Sometimes when I finished an ultra, the people around me are either get sick of hearing me talk about it, or they're not distant cyclists, so they just don't get it fundamentally. And I kind of realized, like, I'm not wasting my time by telling them, but I'm dominating this topic of conversation, and we should really talk about more mutual things. So journaling can be really great in that.
Yeah, you have great awareness there too. That makes a big difference. Right. What was the bike you rode for the Tour Divide?
I used a Salsa Cutthroat, and it worked out really well for me. I was kind of wishing for a front suspension in the end in New Mexico, because I was so fatigued, and it gets really rough and rocky. And I just felt like I was taking a bit too much of a beating on the washboard and everything. Yeah. So I did wish for a little suspension at the end. I used the Redshift suspension stem, which definitely eats up some of the lumps and bumps. And I think the fact that I was so tired made everything feel worse. When you're sleep deprived, your pain threshold just falls apart, and you just, everything hurt. So in general, I had a really great experience on the bike. I didn't have many mechanicals. I got one bad puncture that I filled with a bunch of bacon strips. And then I got to a town, I think Del Norte, and the bike shop there was fabulous. They swapped my tire out. They lent me a bicycle to go get resupply while they were changing my tire. Just very efficient. They had my bike ready to go before I was ready to go. And that was wonderful, because I just had too many bacon strips. It was not going to hold up. And putting a tube in is just asking for trouble on a course like that.
Yeah, it is.
My derailleur hanger broke. I think it had just been bashed around a bit. I don't know what happened, but it fell off, and it was just like hanging by the chain. And I had a spare one. I actually have to order a spare one, because now I don't have a spare one anymore. So thank you. I'm going to note that down.
Yeah. Is that something that you travel with a lot? Like, because this happens a lot with derailleur hangers. Too many times to count.
It is something I travel with, yeah. And it's just a small piece, so it doesn't take up much room. And I've been carrying one around in my road bike repair kit and my, adventure bike repair kit forever. And I'm glad I got to use it. It was a pretty easy change. I watched a YouTube video and then kind of tried to recall it. And it seemed like, I did it. It was fine. I got a few mosquito bites in the process, but it wasn't a big deal. And then I was going to bring the bike into a bike shop to show it to them and be like, did I do this right? Can you check? And I just didn't want to wait for a bike shop to be open. Like, there's not that many on the Divide route. And I kept getting into town too early or too late. And I also figured, like, if it lasts 50 miles, it'll probably be okay. Like, I've probably done it correctly.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
You'll know right away.
Yeah. And people have these crazy mechanicals, because the road is, it's a bit unpredictable. Like, you might just smash into a rock and break some spokes. And I am glad that I didn't have any of those experiences. I did spend time getting my bike tuned up beforehand. I got a lot of drivetrain components and stuff replaced. So I think going in with a fresh bike, or as fresh as it can be for a 2018 bike, is really important and helps prevent stuff in the long run of the race.
It really does. What drivetrain were you riding on that
I don't
bike?
really pay attention to stuff like that. Yeah, I just kind of ride what works for me. I'm doing Arkansas high country next week, and I'm putting on a...
What are you going to ride?
I'm riding the same...
That's a different bike.
I'm putting on the same bike, but I'm going to put a smaller front chainring because it's so pitchy in the Ozarks. And I will be hiking my bike a bit, but I don't want to be hiking it more than I have to. And I think that's the challenge when you have the 1x front chainring, is you have to balance like your gears. And I asked them to put on one of those big cassettes on the back, and they were like, oh, we can't, we need to change all of this, and it's going to cost X $100.
Yeah, because you probably need a longer cage derailleur than you need.
I just thought it was
it's a whole other animal too. Yeah, I work at a bike shop. So
and
I actually just changed my cassette to a bigger one, and I was told by so many shops, no, you can't, you need a new derailleur and it won't fit. But I was able to get a bigger pulley.
Oh, cool.
That it cost, I don't know, $100 or less, and it fit. So I'll send it to you. It's possible.
Oh, good.
Depending how big you want.
Oh, as big as you can get.
Yeah.
Race.
I asked about your drivetrain earlier because of the new SRAM transmission that has the fixed rear derailleur, so you don't have the hanger, so it's a lot more secure. Probably a game changer for events like that.
I have been running SRAM on that bike, so I'll definitely look into it.
It's a gravel. Is it a road, like a regular gravel bike?
Yeah, it has like the
riding?
drop bars and stuff, and
A drop bar. Okay, it's not a straight bar. Okay. And you do aero bars.
Yeah, I just use the clip-on aero bars. They're just so nice to protect your hands when you're on these long events, and
more positions too.
More positions. And I strap stuff to them. I put my rain jacket on my aero bars all the time because it rained like every day at the divide. And I kept it in my seat post bag, which I had to get off my bike, dismount, pull it out of the seat post bag, roll the bag up, and then, shove it back in. And each time you do that, that's a minimum of 30 seconds, and it breaks your momentum versus having the jacket on the aero bars. I had a couple of elastic bands. I had an elastic band around it and then a Velcro strap, keeping it on the aero bars. And I could put it on while I was riding if I wanted to. And even if I stopped, it was like a 10-second stop. It was really quick to pull it on and off. So I'll do that, or I'll, Velcro like candy or licorice or stuff to the aero bars if I need a place to store stuff and I'm out of storage. And it's just, it's another hand position. It's another storage option too.
I love that you said that. Is that one of those good treats that you like on the bike, like licorice? Is that good?
I like licorice. I go for the softer kind. So I don't go for like the, really chewy stuff. Yeah. So I was going for the Twizzlers, like pull-in peels, because those are soft, but then the flavor started to gross me out. I got sick of it. I ate too many.
Isn't there like these little packs now that are the thicker, softer pieces?
Those ones are definitely easier to eat. Yeah. And I think that if they're like,
what about gummy bears?
I like gummy bears. I like the Haribo gummy bears. Like those ones are good.
Those are the best.
The factory is here in Girona.
What? Oh my God.
We're going. I'm gonna
They do tours. It's an interesting topic. And for ultras, it's really an eating contest. And people who have read my book or seen some of my posts, they're just like, Meaghan, you have a terrible diet. And I feel defensive. Like in regular life, I eat a lot of whole foods, a lot of greens. I am supported by F2C Nutrition, and they do protein recovery and carb mixes and things that are great fuel. I focus on really getting my greens and eating nutritious food at home. But then when you're on the road and you're racing and you're burning all these calories, like I just eat anything that I want or my stomach can agree with. And
highest calorie possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and whatever's readily available too. It's like your focus is to stay on the bike as much as you can and just fuel.
And I think like not being emotional about your food choices, just being able to eat what works for you. Like there was a time, I think before I went in the Great Basin, and I stopped at a small resupply, and there was nothing there I really, really wanted. So I got 8 Snickers bars. And I was like, this is fine. This is great. And going into the night, they'll stay cold. They're overpriced, whatever. Like, I'm just not going to look at my credit card bill. This is fine. Yeah. You don't want to get too involved in those little decisions and be like, oh, well,
right.
I'm being ripped off, or like, there's nothing I really want, or maybe I should get, these 3 things so I have variety. Like maybe if you need variety, then do that. But just being able to make quick decisions and get what will get you to the next resupply is the most important thing.
Yeah, and what works for your body too. If that works and it's more consistency like that your body can handle it, then you got to do it. Everybody's different. What I've heard from other cyclists that we've interviewed so far has been, it just gets to a point where it just gets so hard to keep eating. It's like, what can you take down? There's always kind of this point.
Yeah, for sure. One of my tricks is using a lot of liquid calories. And because I have a nutrition sponsor at home, I drink a lot of my calories anyways on training rides and stuff. So I try and adapt that on the road by having high calorie coffee drinks and smoothies, and just kind of, I drink those like Arizona iced teas, those big cans. I'll put one of them in my feed sack, and, or sometimes I'll put a can in my pocket and wait like a half hour and then just kind of slam it and then ride around looking for a recycling bin, which I don't know if that's the best decision, but the can's not heavy, it's just bulky, and sometimes you don't run into recycling or garbage for a long time.
Probably not, right?
Yeah, but trying to get liquid calories because they just seem to digest a lot easier. And often if it's hot, it's a joy to drink something cold. If it's nighttime and it's already chilly, it can be trickier. But I guess I would suggest going for hot chocolate or something and then adding, an ice cube or two so you can drink it quicker. And chocolate milk is something I drink a lot of too.
Yeah, that's one of the staples that you'll see is chocolate milk's always kind of one of those go-tos. It works. It's got protein. It'll fill you up. I just love hearing about what makes you want to, write in general, because your mind is always kind of going. I can see that. Like there's always so much vast stuff to write about, so many different topics you can go with.
Yeah, I think that's my problem is picking something and really developing it.
Oh.
Yeah. And I try and write down any of my ideas so that I can revisit them so they're not like lost, right? And then that urgency to write about them disappears, but they're documented, and maybe a month or two when I have time, or even a year or two later, I can go back and be like, oh, okay, like maybe let's revisit that. I've got some stuff to add to it.
Yeah, just in life, that happens. Just like you said, going back to a job or a relationship or a friendship, it's revisiting something. And that happens. Even friendships, sometimes you're really close with somebody and then you fall out of touch and then they come back into your lives at a certain time. Yeah. And there's always this moment where you're supposed to revisit that, or something just keeps coming up and you're like, I wonder what that's about.
I think that's right.
I listen to those signals a lot.
Yeah, you definitely have to relinquish control over everything. I had a situation maybe when I was going into the basin and I was buying those 8 Snickers bars. The weather was really terrible. It was pouring rain and I was about to go into this really remote section that the roads would turn into peanut butter mud. And I was pretty pissed off because it had been a nice hot morning and I was counting on getting through this without any issues. And the weather forecast was fine. And all of a sudden it's pouring rain and I'm at this tiny town called Atlantic City. And if I continue on, I will be alone in like a remote area with no shelter and muddy roads. But to be told by the weather basically that I couldn't continue on, I was pretty pissed off. And the event photographer happened to be there just as I was rolling into town and kind of grumbling to myself. And he said something to me like, if you get upset every time things are going to plan, you're not going to make it very far. And I was like, I made it this far.
Sometimes that sucks.
It did make sense. Yeah.
Good raw advice.
He's right. You're having your little temper tantrum.
Yeah, I was very much having a temper tantrum.
Which is allowed to. We need to feel the feelings.
I would have been like, if it's not thundering, like I can get around
it. It was definitely thundering.
But it's amazing what we can convince ourselves of, especially with this direction. It's like, nope, I can do that. No, I can figure it out. That's one of the skills. I think that's also a personality trait of anybody that kind of pushes themselves to those limits too, is that you can go through that mentally and physically.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And you've seen yourself succeed before in dire circumstances. So you know it's possible, right? And you want it to happen again, but every situation is different. And I think that you can build a lot of confidence from those successes, but you still have to be aware a different set of factors has to be taken into consideration every time you're making these decisions in an event or in life. It's similar to what happened before, circling back around, but it's still different.
Yeah, every race, every book, every journey is going to be so different from each other. There's some similarities, obviously, we take away, but every situation is going to be completely different in some sense.
There's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of shorter ones. Like my first event was the Trans Am, but I think like lining up on the Grand Depart, though, everybody has their own goal. And because these events they're less structured than, entering an Ironman or something, you sign up. Most of my events, I don't pay a fee to do. So, you pay to have your dot on track leaders. But I think, maybe you really get to choose what your goals are and what you want to get out of it. And people have all sorts of goals and they're in different fitness levels. And that's one of the cool things about bikepacking, and because it is so challenging in any event or race director, they don't put together easy courses. They are all hard. Just getting to the finish is such a chance to celebrate. To me, it reminds me a bit of the sport of rondineering in that everyone who finishes is a winner, right? Like there's a celebration for the person who's like a DFL, like dead fucking last, and, you know, the Lantern Rouge, the last finisher, like these people are honored, you know, just as much as the race winners. And
That's beautiful.
yeah, I think it's a really cool part of the sport. So I think it's pretty well known that you're competing against yourself to try and do your best as much as against other people. And for me, I feel like I'm competing against like the weather most of the time. Like there was times in the divide where I was just like, gosh, I feel like this route is trying to kill me. And you're not even thinking about other people, right? It's just kind of in your head. And I do think that if you prepare properly and you know what you're getting into, like for me, honestly, it's like 90% fun and 10% really, really hard. And that helps me keep a good mindset for most of the time. Like I am genuinely enjoying myself. And when things get hard, hopefully I got the knowledge or the reserve of energy or the skills to kind of push through that and just kind of get out the other side where things can start being fun again. And I don't just do these races purely for fun, but I find having challenges is really important to my life. And I do enjoy myself most of the time. And I think that, you know, that isn't always the case. Like I watch sometimes if the conditions are horrendous and it's just raining every minute, or I did a race called the Buckshot this spring and there was a lot of really cold temperatures and snowy passes on a short course. And I didn't have a lot of fun. Like I made it through. I was just kind of like, I'm just going to get to the finish. And I did end up riding with two other guys and we were all kind of in the same boat. We're like, this isn't super enjoyable right now, but we're here. Like we've got to get to the end now.
That probably made it a little bit better knowing that you're all together kind of in the same boat that way. 'Cause, that freezing style riding is, it's not great. Not fun.
But I guess what I'm saying is like, it's great to know that you can push through when things get hard and you've proven that to yourself, right? Like I think that's one of the reasons I've done stupid rides on the bike in the rain, just to know that I can do it. But I think if it was all like that, you'd be really unhappy and probably not come back for another event. And the most successful racers that I've talked to, like Justinas and Evan Deutsch, who won the Trans Am, like they seem to enjoy themselves a lot of the time. And I think that is a key to being successful is enjoying it and then pushing through when you have to.
Yep. It's enjoying the adventure.
Yeah.
And a bike, there's so many different ways that you can enjoy it. You don't need to do an ultra. You don't need to race at all. You can just bike pack or you can just use for commute, like your sister. There are so many means that a bike can bring happiness and joy into someone's life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
You need to find what works for you and then organically you enjoy being active.
What I hear from Meaghan is she loves gaining that knowledge and that growth from these lessons and being challenged and going on an adventure, filling her brain with more stimulation, and more stimuli of like new sights, new adventures.
And then writing and sharing with us. So really looking forward to know what's next.
Yeah, for sure. Let's chat in a year and see what I've been up to. Let's see what I've written. And the fun thing is that velo, bike in French, is love with the letters arranged. So I have like an obvious title collection in velo, love, to like bring it all together. So that's
clever.
I hate titles. It's so hard to distill a story into a couple words. So that if this worked, I would write it just because the title works.
Yeah. I'm so happy you were able to fit us into your schedule and give us your time. It's been great to get to know you. Definitely going to finish your book as well. It's very easy to read and super inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This has been a really fun way to start on my Friday. And I will listen to a couple of your episodes on my ride today because it's going to be a long one.
Great. And enjoy your ride.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please stay in touch. Have fun today.
Will do. Bye, Debbie. Bye, Juliana.
I want to hear about that donut.
I'll send a photo.
Okay. All right. Cheers.
That's all for today's episode. We want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. Your support means everything to us. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends. Feel free to share your thoughts and feedback. We love hearing from you.